The Maranao people have travelled a long road since the time of that war dance, which is a scene taken from one of their great epics written more than 1,000 years ago, at a time when the Maranao were influenced by Indian culture. That epic, the Durangan, told the tale of gods and their own heroic ancestors who first settled and planted rice in this region of Mindanao, largest island of the southern Philippines. There the Maranao developed that sort of feudal village society with three classes and communal ownership of land that existed throughout the Philippines in those early days, and the Maranaos developed their villages around Lake Lanao. Then in the 15th century came the greatest influence of all, which gave the Maranao a stable, continuous society right up to modern times, the Muslim faith. The spread of the Islamic faith was relatively gradual and peaceful, and the route by which it came from its home in Arabia was by way of India to Malacca, through the islands of Sumatra and Java, along the coastal areas of Borneo, until it finally reached the southern islands of the Philippines. It was originally brought by Arab or perhaps Indian or Chinese traders who did not attempt to colonize. The conversion was made without military invasion, with the result that many earlier features of Maranao life survived. This lake was until modern times inaccessible right in the interior of Mindanao Island. The people of Lake Lanao were never dominated by the Spanish during their 300-year rule, and were only subdued by the Americans at the beginning of this century, when General Pershing sent a gunboat around the lake to receive the homage of their local sultans. One of the 4 rivers flowing into the lake is the Tanaka River, named after a Maranao founding ancestor. With the coming of Islam, the old social system was expanded into a more complex system. The Maranao people were organized into 4 principal, 15 high-ranking, and no less than 28 lower-ranking sultanates. On both banks of the river are some of the oldest settlements, each with its sultan and each with its mosque. Some have roofs tiered one above the other, like pagodas, a feature inherited from the times of early Indian influence, whilst others have paintings of human and animal forms never permitted in Arabia, such as this winged horse with a human head that carried the Prophet Muhammad to heaven. The austerity of the Arabian deserts has been modified by Maranao artists to suit their tropical surroundings. The call to prayer is made from the mosque 5 times a day, and every Friday, prayers are for the whole community, including the women. Allah the All-Powerful, Allah the Merciful, come to prayer, come to prayer. These men are seated on the polished stone floor, those of highest rank, the title holders, occupying the positions up in the front, while at the back of the mosque, and separated from the men, are the Maranao women, who have never been kept in purdah or obliged to wear the veil. Each community has its religious leader and teacher, the Imam. It is he who reads passages of the Holy Scripture, the Quran, the teachings of Muhammad the Prophet from the holy city of Mecca. He reads in Arabic and explains the text in the Maranao language. It is towards Mecca that men face when they pray. The villages around Lake Lanao specialize in different crafts. On the east of the lake, in Ramain and Mulundu, are wood carvers and mat makers. Here the most famous carver happens to be the local sultan, and the village children look on, watching him as he prepares his wood. He is working outside his house in the middle of the village, squatting in front of the elaborately carved headboard of a huge bed made for the family of a Maranao nobleman. Such beds will be covered with sleeping mats made from split reeds, which the girls, when they're still quite young, learn to weave. The designs of these mats are strong, abstract, usually geometric patterns in purple, yellow, and green. In the shade under his house, the carver continues making the image of a bird. The most conspicuous bird over the lake is the fish eagle. And the bird being carved, the Sarimanok, will eventually have fish in its beak and claws. In pagan times, the Sarimanok represented a sacrificial cockerel. But after the arrival of Islam, its usage altered until in modern Maranao society it's a symbol of status. On the other side of the lake, 2/3 of the population of Tugaya village are engaged in making brassware. One legend tells how hundreds of years ago, 2 brothers arrived from the neighboring Sultanate of Brunei in Borneo and brought with them the secrets of casting brass. They are considered founding ancestors of the village. One brother returned to Brunei, and the other stayed in order to establish the art of brass making in Tugaya. The first stage of making the molds has already been done underneath the family houses. This is guarded from outsiders and treated as secret, though in fact it is nothing more nor less than the well-known lost wax process. A wax model has been made and coated with casting sand. The wax is burnt away, and the molten brass, which is an amalgam of copper and zinc, is poured into the mold and then left to cool. casting sand is struck off, quite a presentable brass vessel begins to appear, and a certain amount of the still rough pattern is already discernible. After a lot more work of cleaning out the pattern, filing down the rough bits, burnishing and polishing the surfaces, then this glittering brass work will be ready for display. On top of the mouth heart is a stylized Naga, the sacred serpent of Hindu-Buddhist mythology, which still persists in Maranao decorative art today. It appears again on a brass goblet, together with the sarimanok. And on these rare old houses, built for sultans on massive tree posts, the Naga comes again, facing east towards the rising sun, to catch the good luck of dawn and bring it into the Sultan's house. Here in the village of Bacolor de Chico, on the northern side of the lake, the finest weaving is done by women at home, the skill being handed down from generation to generation. The traditional patterns are made up of natural forms derived from flowers, trees, fishes and birds, but are so abstracted that they're hardly recognizable. The wide border and brilliant yellow coloring are reserved for families of the sultans and other ranking title holders. The most highly prized and widely discussed garment is the malong, which is the Maranao version of a sarong. There are special malongs for different ranks of people and for different social occasions, such as coronations or weddings. It is an accomplishment for young women to perform a song-dance ritual from one of the epics to display the various ways of wearing the malong and showing off its beauty against their own. This is one of the formal occasions when the sarimanok, with fish in its beak and claws, is on display. If I were a bird, I would fly and perch on the roof of your house. I would rather die than remain separated from you. I would die rather than deceive you. This whole dance song ritual is the reenactment of an episode from the Durangan epic, which tells of love, courtship, and preparation for marriage. Like the sarimanok, the elaborate carving of the kulintang is in a style that developed during pagan times long before the coming of Islam, and which had its origin in the wild, luxuriant foliage of the tropical forest. graduated and bossed gongs made into gaya is played for ceremonial occasions and today is a wedding. A boatload of wedding guests have come up the Taraka River. The gongs of the Kulintang were made into gaya, and so were the stands and dishes loaded with sweetmeats. The women are wearing their best malongs from the collar chico, and the children carry toy flags. They all come ashore carrying the stands and dishes to the wedding house. The main room, decorated with woven textiles, is spacious enough to seat the large number of people who listen as the genealogies of the families are recited. Listening to his family's genealogy, the groom reclines on the large family bed, while the bride at the other end of the room is surrounded by her family, whose genealogy is just as important as his. The Sultan's representative may join in to remind the young couple of the sanctity of the social order established long ago by their ancestors. The bride herself does not actually take part in the marriage service, which is restricted to the men. It is the bridegroom who makes the contract and takes the vows, his right hand clasped by the religious leader, the imam. The principal people, such as the bride's relatives, the imam, the sultan, and other title holders, have already received their share of the bride price. So now it only remains to give something to the organizers of the wedding. For the benefit of all the people who have come to the house to witness the marriage, they have engaged a performer to sing verses from the Durangan epic and help amuse the guests. Above the wedding house flutters the huge traditional flag, symbol of the status of the families and their continued good fortune. Outside the ordinary village houses, there are humbler flags. On the shop, the notice uses Arabic script for Maranao words. Credit is fine, but we need cash. The great popular game of the village is chess, and the piece carved in the shape of a naga is the knight. As the great poet said, 'tis all a checkerboard of nights and days, where destiny with men for pieces plays. Hither and thither moves, mates and slays. Then, one by one, back in the closet lays. The children are carrying on their heads offerings of money, small denomination banknotes. White is the color of mourning. The deep-throated gongs announce that the funeral of one of the village women is about to begin. village are bringing to this large house small offerings of money, tokens of sympathy for the bereaved family. To the grieving family, the small tokens of sympathy are handed over. The golden canopy covering the bier and the 4 golden parasols protecting it from the blazing midday sun indicate her high social status, a reminder that she was a member of a noble family. After going all around the village, the procession circles the mosque and heads towards the graveyard. Distraught with grief, the women throw themselves on the bier and begin to shake the canopy as the bier is lowered into the grave. The women continue shaking the canopy as though they were helping to deliver the spirit of the dead woman. For after the death of the body, the spirit will continue in an afterlife in heaven, according to the beliefs of the Islamic religion. Future generations of Maranao will maybe continue to draw the food of life from the waters of Lake Lanao, as they have done for hundreds of years, under the shadow of their religion, the Muslim faith. The faith of Islam that has grown and developed in very distinctive ways amongst the Maranao people.